Hi, this is Henry Sanders, CEO of Fox Valley 365 and 365 Media. We thank you for joining us today. As some of you who might know who we are, our mission is to really make sure that we amplify the voices of color in the state of Wisconsin. And we are just excited to have this panel. We want to thank our partners at USA Today Network. Thank you for joining us. And I want to thank all of our wonderful panelists who we're talking with offline and getting to know some of the wonderful, talented people that are already up in your northeast Wisconsin. And I have to say this for people who are in Milwaukee, in Madison, watching this right now, there are people of color in that region. Yes, there are people of color outside of Madison, Milwaukee, who are doing real things. So we're laughing, but I'm telling you, I travel a lot for people who don't think there's people of color outside of Madison and Milwaukee, and there really is. So before I start, why don't you each of you introduce yourselves and what you do, and then we'll go from there. Why don't we start with you, Nick?
Oh, I'm Nick Ivory. I'm an equity mentor at Menasha High School.
You want to go next, Raya?
Sure, I'm Raya Sankari Diaz, and I'm the Diversity and Inclusion Coordinator for the City of Green Bay.
Jessica?
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Jessica Franco Morales, and I am a DEI career coach for Northeast Wisconsin Technical College here in the Green Bay area.
And Demira?
Hello, my name is Demira Grady, and I serve as the Associate Vice Chancellor of Academic Support for Inclusive Excellence and as the University Diversity Officer at the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh. It is a long, exhausting title, kind of relates to how exhausting some days my job can be. So.
That is a big title, but I'm sure you can handle it. Yes. So also let people know that you can ask, if you ask a question, we will try to get to your questions. We have a limited time here, but we will take questions from the audience. And if you have questions, I can't promise I'll get to all of them, but we will try to get to the ones that we can. And I want to also say thanks to everyone at our News Lab, who's a partnership up in that area. And I love the title of the series is Home is Here series. And I love that because as people of color, a lot of times we travel, especially in predominantly white areas, you feel like you're on the away team. And so this is a good time to make sure that we can make everyone feel like they're at home. So let's just jump in here. And I want to start with, let me see what I want to start with here. I'm going to stick with Raya because she looks so serious. I'm going to stick with her. There you go. She's smiling. Okay. Let's first question. Let's define what diversity, equity, and inclusion mean in your work. And if it's different, how do you define it in your life?
Sure, Henry, that's an amazing question. So the way I would define it as far as work goes would really be examining the different populations around me. So really keeping my finger on the pulse of the community that we're serving from a city standpoint, both internally and externally, and then creating and maintaining those spaces for populations. And so what that might look like kind of from a specific standpoint is examining our hiring processes, looking at how we address our neighborhood associations, continuing to understand how our population is growing, and then also assessing from a programs perspective, both internally and externally, what it is that we have to offer in regards to DE&I. And then on a personal note, that looks like being active within the school systems. I have children, and so part of that is understanding the programming that goes on for my own children in my personal life, and then from an organizational standpoint, understanding places that my friends work, understanding places that my family works, and looking at the different opportunities and programming that those institutions have as well.
Thank you. That's Nick. Why don't you go next? That was a powerful. Can you follow that up? That was a.
I'll try. So me working in the school district, at the high school, I'm at Menasha High School, like I said. So this kind of work, diversity, equity, and inclusion work to me in my arena means making our staff and students feel like they belong in each of our buildings. They have their true histories represented in our lessons. And also they have folks like themselves represented from our leadership down to our classrooms, to our after school programs, to our sporting events, and things of that nature. So trying to wrap it all in one, but have representation at every level that we serve. As far as life goes, I'm open book, man. I meet people where they are, meet them for who they are, and I develop my relationships from there. So it just bleeds in with everything that I do.
Yeah, I love that saying. Make sure students feel like they belong. I love that, and that's a challenge for everyone. Jessica, what about you?
Yeah, so for me, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as far as my line of work, what it means to me is working to ensure that all students have access to quality education, particularly by focusing on equity and leveraging policy. I am really interested and attuned to the policies and practices adopted by different institutions and how they have a differential impact on customers, in this case, students. I really think that that is how we make actionable change, is by re-looking at the way that things are done. I appreciate the more fun aspects of DEI work with representation, making sure everyone feels represented. But I really do feel like there's a need and opportunity to go deeper and start looking, behind the scenes at the systems and the policies that, uphold, systems of oppression that keep people out. So that's what it looks like in my line of work. As far as in my personal life, I try to live by upholding the principles of, not only diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also social justice, and try to practice that in everything that I do, in the relationships that I have with community members and the organizations that I am aligned with. I'm a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. We are a service organization, and social action is a big part of what we do. So just try to live the principles of, social justice in everything that I do.
Shout out to your sorority. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Shout out to the Deltas.
All the AKs and everyone is going like putting their heads down right now. My mom's AK, so she's mad at me right now. But I just gave you a shout out, Mom AK, so it's all even.
It's all love. It's all love.
It's all love. Demira, what about you?
Yeah, I would amplify and echo some of the things that have already been said. For me in this work, I consider myself an essential worker. Working in higher education, and I think to some of the comments that were made about how do we move the conversation from a personal one to an institutional and then a structural view. So we are dismantling, interrogating policies and procedures that exists that have structurally excluded students from higher education. And so that's one of my biggest focuses. And I put my energy there before I even go out and recruit students. Because for me, without true equity, meaning that there is equitable distribution of opportunities, access, and some power and privilege in education, we're being predatory when we recruit people and ensure that they're going to have a sense of belonging at our institutions when they're really not. And so I want to ensure that I'm building the infrastructure for everybody to come to UW Oshkosh or to Oshkosh in general and feel a sense of belonging and community, one, but have that experience of EDI embedded into everything. They don't have to go to a separate program. They don't have to go to a training. They don't have to go to a special class because they're other in a sense, but it's embedded. Everybody has a shared responsibility and it's inescapable in a sense. And so I spend a lot of my time, I always joke, I don't want to do, TED Talks. I don't want to write a book. I don't want to do research. I want to be on the front line, understanding the needs of the people I'm wanting to serve and figuring out how do I create the opportunity for them to raise their hand and say they want to go to higher education. And I've implemented programming that has made that a reality. We've put resources in the school, or we've done pre-college programming to kind of bridge that gap, or had conversations with community members and families so we can dismantle some of the myths around higher education or even living in Oshkosh community. So having those relationships has been important for me in my work. And how I kind of bridge that personally is I say this: I am not an expert in DEI. If anyone tells you they are an expert, do not hire them. Do not listen to them. Nobody can be an expert in this work. It is a discipline. I have a lot of lived experience, not growing up in Wisconsin. And then when I did come to Wisconsin, I lived in Milwaukee. So I have a lot of lived experience that informs my work and has taught me to have boundaries. So my boundary is that I'm not an expert. I relate to the discourse, and I don't get in the arena to debate my own oppression. And through that lens, I'm also a licensed professional counselor. So I'm able to have grounded conversations with people to and give grace, give education, and have opportunities for healthy conflict in the discussion of, okay, this is great, let's do programming, let's do training, but how do we collectively, to the point made earlier, start looking at the systems that continue to oppress us all and put our resources together to start dismantling those policies and procedures and structures.
You all gave really powerful answers. And you know what? I want to step back, because I know there's people who are probably watching saying, why even do DNI at all? Why does that even help? How does that help my organization? How does that help my school? How does that help my business? How does that help my nonprofit organization? Why do DNI? I want to judge everyone fair. Why do it? So two questions I want to ask. Why do DNI? Why is it important? Is it just about representation, but why does it matter? And then the second thing is, what are some important questions for organizations to ask themselves once they decide that they want to do DNI? I'm going to start with you, Jessica. She goes, oh, no.
Ooh, lucky me. I had to think about that for a little bit, but I'll do my best. How I have heard businesses and institutions rationalize the need for diversity, equity, and inclusion is to primarily in the line of, the population, the demographics of our population are changing. And so we want to better, we want to adjust our product essentially to our changing demographics of our customers. So, from a business side of things and how I've seen DE&I rationalize on the business side, it's just producing a better product for, changing customers. However, personally, I feel, how I would respond to that question personally is, as a community, we have to be committed to social justice. And what that requires also is restorative justice. I think it's easy for people to want to get to a better place while skipping the really, really tough conversations, the heavy lifting, the really uncomfortable process of, that restorative justice requires. And so for me, I think DE&I is necessary because that's how we all get to a better place. And without really interrogating and interrupting, again, systems of oppression, we are just going to be putting a Band-Aid on the problem. And it won't allow us to move forward collectively in a genuine, sustainable way. So that's how I would respond to that, personally, and why I think it's important.
And to follow up on that, what if your organization, Jessica, think about doing DNI? What are some important questions for organizations to ask themselves when they're thinking about beginning in this process?
Yeah, I think, the first question should be, what is the commitment level? Are you committed to putting resources, money behind these efforts? How are you leveraging the talent that you already have? A lot of times, when it comes to DEI, organizations want to look outward, bring the experts in, but there's a lot of collective knowledge and experience from the current employees, or even just the community. right? Even just leveraging the knowledge of community members. So what is the commitment level? What are some of the assets that you already have, whether it's in your organization or in your community? And then what's been really important to me as of late is, are you ready to support the people that are going to be doing this work on behalf of the organization? That support is extremely important. Because it's not fair for professionals of color to be used as collateral in this, fight for social justice.
Yeah, I love that commitment and helping support the people who are actually doing the work. They usually take the brunt of all the expectations. And a lot of people tend to think that D&I work can happen overnight, and it's a journey, right? It's a process. But Nick, what about you? Like, why D&I? Like, why is that important? And then the second question, part of that is like, if you're an organization or even a school district, think about doing some of this D&I work, what some questions should they ask themselves?
Well, from a business standpoint, even an organization standpoint, as a school district, I think it's pretty simple. If you can't adjust, you can't advance. So if you can't adjust to the change in climate in your buildings or in your line of work, then you can't advance your product that you have or the levels of education that your students are receiving from your staff. So that's as simple as I can put it with that. But some of the questions, I mean, are you prepared to do this work? And do you have the manpower to really dig into the work? Because it's a lot that goes into this type of work. I mean, you can't listen to one point of view and build things off of that. You got to have a team of people, because you got to have the lived experiences from different people. You got to have we talk about culture, right? Culture is not our skin color. Culture is the environment in which we've grown. So different people have different cultures. Same skin complexion can have completely different cultures. So those are the things you got to be prepared for as far as digging. Are you ready to dig? Do you have the manpower to dig? And I mean, is this work real to you, or are you just doing this work for your numbers?
Yeah, what I love about that is you're right. People of color are not monolithic. Like, we all do not think alike and act alike, and it's always interesting when people assume that we do. But why would we all think alike? And it's
Right.
just, it's an interesting concept. So, Ryan, same question to you. Why is DNI important? And then, like, if your organization are thinking about starting DNI, what questions should they be asking themselves?
So D&I is important to me on many different levels. On a personal note, it's important to me because I want to see people succeed in my community, within my home structure, within my family. That's extremely important to me. I also want to see people know and feel like there are spaces that they belong. And so kind of perpetuating that, I know we talk a lot, especially in the last couple of years, about work-life integration, and that is real. We have so much going on from life that comes into work with us. It follows us in. Just because we're sitting at a desk does not mean our phones stop buzzing with information going on in the world around us, right? So we have to be extremely cognizant of our environment. So it really crosses over. And then, of course, from a business standpoint, when we look at revenue, we know that revenue can go up anywhere from 19 to 80%, right? If there's diversity of thought in the room, then innovation starts happening, and it completely has a huge effect on a business outcome. And so there's more innovation happening. There's conversations happening that weren't happening even, a month ago when you have diversity of thought in the room. On top of that, there's an opportunity to look through different lenses and examine different possibilities. So there's buzz that's created surrounding D&I in the workplace, right? And then there's also this factor of trust that happens if it's done well for inclusion and belonging. And so there's kind of this space that's held over time, and that space grows in order to retain those people. So to speak to the other part of the question, retention is a huge piece of this, right? We know that this is really kind of a point of interest for different organizations right now, D&I, right? But what are we going to be doing to retain these populations we're trying to bring in? What are we doing to educate ourselves about the population this education, that self-awareness, checking our own biases, using the resources that are put out. Harvard has an excellent implicit bias quiz that people can take to just understand themselves a little bit more as they prepare to hire different populations coming in. So examining programming. Do you have employee resource groups? How strong are those employee resource groups at this point? Is there a budget for those employee resource groups? And then oftentimes we see organizations that kind of have a large volunteer base when it comes to supporting D&I spaces, right? And so putting some dollars behind that and actually creating the positions in order to support the foundations that we're creating to retain the populations that we're trying to bring in is a large piece of this. So it's kind of twofold. We have to have the energy behind it. We have to have the education that goes along with it, the programming, and then the budget to help impact that growth in the long run.
Yeah, so I hear commitment again, really about commitment and true commitment, putting some dollars behind it. But actually, what I think we don't talk about enough when it comes to diversity and inclusion is innovation. And
Absolutely.
if you really want to be innovative, and this data backs this up, this is not like someone just saying it, there's data backing it up. The more diverse you are in your business organization, the more innovation goes up, the more creativity goes up. So it really makes sense if you think about it. People have more different backgrounds. They're going to bring in different ideas. So innovation, I love that you brought that up because I think innovation is something we don't talk enough about when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So coming to my friend over in Oshkosh, what do you think, Jamira?
Yeah, I'm going to say yes and, because I don't want to just reiterate what's already been said, but I like to be a little bit provocative. So I'm going to throw some other things into this conversation. I think DEI, Inclusive Excellence, EDI, EDIJ, however you want to say it, the trend of it is a little oftentimes concerning to me because it's based on capitalism, right? There's a lot of money out there invested into this work that oftentimes is not given to minoritized or structurally excluded people to be centered and to be given resources to do the work. I often tease that there are communities in Wisconsin that don't need our input. They don't need us to try to recruit them. They need our resources. They need our power and privilege. They don't want to come to our affinity group meetings. They don't want to come and see us building a playground in their neighborhoods. That's not what they need, right? And so it's great that we all take the personal responsibility to educate ourselves, refresh our browsers, understand there is confirmation bias if we only listen to certain news channels or radio broadcasts or read certain books, that we need to continue to challenge ourselves in how we even view this, even when we feel like we are experts and immersed into the teaching, the training, the understanding of what this is. And so one thing I would ask institutions is really what you just asked, is why. I would also ask them, what would need to change or exist for it to work? It's fine. You can throw all the money at me, the buy-in. You can give me deputy officers and a whole division. But unless the preconditions are met for me to be able to move within a dominant culture when I am a minoritized women, to make changes, it's not going to work. It's going to be polarizing, and I'm going to have to figure out how to protect myself professionally and protect the initiatives that I'm trying to implement. And so I think EDI is important for us to continue to understand that it's not just one training. It's not a diversity statement. It's not a recruitment plan. It's not a DEI plan. If your strategic plan and your DEI plan are not one of the same, and you have DEI initiatives or EDI initiatives, they are not going to work. You need to really embed this and make it inescapable for every employee. You don't hire people and put them in the office in the corner or give them the smallest budget or expect them to address 100+ years of racism in one position in 1 year, to change processes and procedures by themselves when there's governing bodies or legislators that's going to combat anything they try to put forward. And so we need to be realistic about the conditions that need to exist for it to work. And we also need to stop taking practices from institutions and organizations that don't mirror the very thing we're trying to achieve, and and trying to scale them up and operationalize them as best practices when they're not. We need to find strategies that respond to the situation, and everybody's situation is not the same. And so you need to be able to spend time kind of doing an appreciative inquiry on what it is in the landscape of your organization, and then spend time designing what you want to implement, and then put together the conditions for you to be able to implement it. And that's what I would say. So it's important, but it does scare me, the amount of just misinformation and how people take EDI initiatives and weaponize them and sometimes sell people their oppression. That is not equity, diversity, inclusion. That is not inclusive excellence. I don't want to be sold my oppression. I want to be able to come to work. I don't want to come to the Black people meeting. I don't want to do that. I want to just come to work, be able to exist, and be able to have the same resources and opportunity everybody else has. And that's what I push for.
Woo! Mic drop. I love what you said, and a couple of things really stood out to me. So one, I hope people are really listening to this, because all the panelists said some really powerful stuff that you would pay consultants a lot of money to go to learn that they're giving you for free here. But what you just said, I love about protecting the person who's in a dominant environment. I think that is really key for people who are doing this work. You could be seen as a troublemaker or the person who's just a token. And so I love how you say protecting that person. I think that's so powerful, what you said. And I also think what you said, that you don't want to come and be just the Black group, like you are, like, this is about excellence. And I think that's really powerful stuff. I hope people are really getting this. I really want to get to, we have 2 questions here from the audience. I want to come to Nick first. And this one, it says, I wonder how students of color and those who've been marginalized will describe their experience.
Well, that question, tough. So what I do, this thing I call, who am I? I've done that with my students in the past. And I have my students sit down, not in one session, but take the time to just speak about who they see themselves as, right? And then how other people view them. And when I have them do that, you come out with a lot of students that'll tell you that they don't feel like they belong in any one of these classrooms they're in, walking down any one of these streets that they walk down every day. So they feel you got the kids that feel tokenized by their own folks and by folks outside of their race as well. So they're fighting this constant battle of, where do I belong? Especially when you have mixed race kids. They have to choose a side per se, or the other side won't accept them. So it's these constant battles and these fights that these students have. And it takes mentors. It takes teachers in the building, different staff, to really get these kids to understand who they are, who they want to be, and help them to get to those points in their lives. You don't have to pick a race because you're mixed race. You don't have to pick a side to be on. You be who you are, right? So giving the kids that confidence is having those, as people say, difficult conversations, but I don't call them difficult. It's just sitting down talking and getting to know. It's building a relationship. And when you build that relationship with those students, that bleeds outside of that office when they come in and sit in the office and talk to me. It bleeds outside of that, out into their everyday life, into their community, into their work, into their school work. It bleeds into everything. So it's just about building up that confidence and getting to know those students. So giving them the platform to speak. So a lot of the stuff that I try and do, I try to be in the background. I try to push all of this confidence in the students to speak it out, so our staff and our community can hear it from our students and not from me or not from our other staff, but have the students speak it. I think it has a bigger impact, a greater impact on people when they hear it coming directly from the students and not the third party. So just giving them that space and that opportunity, building that confidence, and letting them know you can speak exactly how you feel without worrying about repercussions coming from anywhere. So
yeah, that's all. And I love what you said. Who am I? Is that what you said? Was who am I? That's powerful, because it's all about identity and who you are. And we were actually having this conversation offline, right, about identity and multicultural. And when I was growing up, I'm showing my age here, but if you had any Black and you were black. Like I don't
Mhm.
care if you right, like if you are black and Latina or black and white, whatever. But if you're black, the country considers you black. That has changed drastically. And how do the people have access to understand that they're more than just the black person? Well, my dad might be black, but my mom is whatever, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
How do you let people do that?
I think we have to remember too, like now, even structurally, like I always joke, until 2000, I could only pick I was black wherever I went. And then when I saw the option, pick all that apply, I'm like, But I think it is culturally too, because when you are black in anything, you are black. But if you are some other, like if you are white and Asian, you are Asian, right? If you're Hispanic and white, you're usually Hispanic. So I think the unfortunate part federally, even how we click our students, is there's a hierarchy to it.
Yeah. Jessica, right? Do you want to get on to the question that the person that you want to?
Yeah, can I add to this one too?
Yeah, of course.
I think I have a unique experience. One, I'll start with just like my observations in my profession. So I have the privilege of working with high school age students and helping them transition to post-secondary. I have the privilege of working in the local school district here, which I'm a graduate of. Both of my parents are educators, so very tied to the community and the district. And, just from my observations, I think students might have a difficult time explaining or expressing how they feel as a student of color, because I don't think we do enough to help students develop their social consciousness. And I think that's key. I mean, it starts from, telling students about their culture, their history, the books that we read or that we implement in the schools, start to dismantle these damaging stereotypes that we often perpetuate in the media, in our reading materials, in our conversations about people from different cultures. If a student if that's all they see and hear and learn about in that environment, they are going to struggle, to see themselves in a different light, or to really truly talk about their identity and their social consciousness. And so I think that's a piece that's missing, critically missing in our schools. We need more people like Nick, who are mentors, who are, committed to giving students a voice, committed to letting students express themselves, letting students ask questions about identity and what it means to them. And, we have great people working in the schools. Unfortunately, going back to the conversation regarding resources, these also tend to be the folks that, anybody with behavior issues, go talk to this person. It's not just limited to students with behavior issues. We need everyone. We need teachers of color. We need staff of color. We need leadership of color. We need mentors, coaches, everything. So our students are able to see themselves and ask those questions, and learn about things that they're not learning in their educational materials. And just the last thing too, I mean, that's from observation, but then also from experience, right? Having grown up in the area, gone through the school system, being, designated as the one, because I was good academically in sports and all of those things, but I saw a lot of the students that looked like me and students of color left behind. One of my biggest things is you don't have to be extraordinary to be given equal access to opportunities. And I feel like we need to start to interrogate that a little bit more.
You don't have to be extraordinary to get access to opportunities. That's powerful. I hope people are really listening to this, because we have Jessica Raya here, Nick Demare, who are really, really giving us lots of words of wisdom here. This is really, I'm enjoying this conversation so much. Ryan, do you want to talk to this question?
I would like to, absolutely. So I know in my current role, I serve the city of Green Bay. A few roles past, I worked for Omaha Public Schools, the largest district in the state of Nebraska, working as a bilingual liaison, really honing in on some of the issues with students, specifically middle and high school age students. And so I was working with refugee populations and asylum seekers coming in from all corners of the world. More specifically, I worked with populations coming in from Central America as well as the Middle East. And during that time, what I honed in on was these students and families all need support, right? And so when we think about how they're feeling, I think the best word I would use to describe how my students were feeling was caught in subcultures that they're leaning into, coming into this kind of regional space, feeling underrepresented, feeling alone, and then really looking for those subgroups to kind of click in with in order to find their identities in these spaces. And so part of what we need is relationship building and having that representation in those buildings, or if students are in a virtual space, I know I still know some refugee students who are doing virtual learning at this time in the state of Wisconsin. And so what we need is that representation, the linguistic ability to connect with the students and the families. I can't tell you how many times I used to have the parents come into my office just to speak about what they were going through, right? Trying to support their students and trying to connect with the staff in the school systems. And Omaha Public Schools does an excellent job of staffing for these roles and retaining people for these roles. And so that was a huge blessing for these families. And with that, we can always add staff. We can always continue to bring more linguistic abilities into our buildings and into our communities, looking at recruiting, bringing people in. Right now, this is such an imperative time to have that representation and to really work with our kids. We're going through several different types of challenges right now. We have the pandemic going on, and then we also have these incredible challenges with racism going on right now. And so this is not over. And I think that's part of the conversation that has to be had, especially in this state and in this space, right? This is not over. The pandemic continues, although it appears that it's over for many people. This is still happening. This is still a concern in many people's homes. And in addition to that, people protect themselves. People, especially students, are going through mental health issues like crazy right now. And their parents or their caregivers are looking to figure out how can they best support them. Part of that is having that staff in place in schools and looking to invest more in mental health workers that can support our students. So, and then having those conversations on a regular basis to assess the needs that people have. So it's going to be an ongoing process, but part of what we can do to help address it is put positions in these buildings to support the community at a much more, I would say, kind of to perpetuate that in a stronger sense for the community.
Yeah, thank you. That's powerful. Representation. Which, Demar, I'm gonna come to you with this next question, but do you want to answer this question at all? I know you chimed in a little bit earlier on the.
I'll just add because I'm last. Yes, and I have to. I don't want to repeat anything that's been said.
For the record, I'm about to come to you again first. So
no, I'm teasing you. But I don't want to seem like I don't agree with what's being said. Yes, and then I just want to add an additional thing. But I want to tie up the representation piece. One thing I've been telling people is that representation matters, but we can't wait for representation to be there or be in place for us to act. Right. Oftentimes what I hear from people that consult with me, or even sometimes different departments in my institution, well, we don't have the representation, or we don't have the resources to build what you're asking, so we have to wait. You don't have to wait to act. You can start building for equity, diversity, inclusion now while we wait for it to come. Right? So we can have it here. So we are culturally responsive. Once we get someone who is Hispanic and speaks only Spanish, we want to make sure our whole orientation and our admission process is bilingual. We can build that. And when it's needed, it's there. And so I always push people, like, representation matters, but you don't have to wait. And I also want to say, in terms of just how we think about our students and what our students say, I will share. I worked at Milwaukee Area Technical College before coming here, and so it was a majority minority serving institution. Honestly, some of the same issues that are prevalent at a predominantly white institution, but one difference I've noticed right away is this idea of who comes to our door underrepresented and marginalized. And we oftentimes, in spaces where there isn't representation, we sell people who are othered their oppression, unintentionally, with good intentions oftentimes, but it's very violently inflicted on people. And I will give an example. When I started here, I had a friend who worked with me in Milwaukee, whose daughter was at UW Oshkosh, and she was a junior here. I wanted to hire her to be a research assistant for me. And I asked her, have you ever heard of my division? And she's like, I've never heard of your division. So Academic Support of Inclusive Excellence. And I said, well, you would find us under the diversity button. And she said, why would I be looking for diversity? And I was like, yes, why would she be looking for diversity? We make these assumptions that students who come to us who are racialized, marginalized, underrepresented, we need to center those aspects of their identity, teach them about it, help them understand so they can learn how to advocate for themselves. Yes, but I also want us to ensure that they thrive in either our institutions or their place of work, and that if they come to us marginalized, they don't leave further marginalized. And so that's one thing I would say is that I hear some of the same things that have been said about what students say, but also this idea of I feel othered in a space because it's predominantly white and people want me to make a bigger issue out of it than I want to. So.
Or you're the person of color and they come ask you.
Or you're tokenized. Or we like to put students on panels and have them teach us about their identities, and they don't know. These babies don't know. So it's traumatizing. I've seen a lot of real time. I call it voyeurism, like trauma voyeurism of it. Yes, I've seen it happening, and I'm a disruptor, so of course I shut it down. But it's a real thing that happens in spaces.
And I love that, because you have to educate sometimes our allies and our friends that yes, we care about these issues, but I'm Black, but it's not my only thing. I'm more than just a Black guy. So if you want to come, I understand that you're learning about this, but I don't want to answer these questions every day about what you're going through. Like, that's not my job.
That's not mine. Yes. And, I have a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old, and Gen Z, the data shows that they don't want to come to institutions and have to go to cultural centers. They don't want that experience anymore. And it was great that it existed for me, for other people who have gone through higher education, but they want that experience embedded. They want to be immersed. They want to learn alongside allies and advocates. They don't want to have to be segregated anymore in spaces. They want to be integrated.
So now I'm going to start with you with this question, Damaris. I'm starting with you. Are we good now? Are we good?
Yes.
But it actually deals with representation. So I think this is a really good question for you. How do you push back against comments from leadership, staff, etc., who might say, we just hire or promote the best person for the job, regardless of race or gender? Meaning representation is not a big deal. They're looking for the best person. How would you answer that question?
Well, I will say first this, that at UW Oshkosh, I stopped using the word people of color, and I say structurally excluded, because I want to highlight, just even in academia, especially, this idea of how the structure is built, how disciplines have been built, how the idea of research, the whole structure, and I constantly interrogate it. And I have been in spaces where I have started to ask, the same way we critique someone's CV, their research, I want to critique their immersion into DEI, right? I want them to be able to use language that's equitable. I want us to be able to understand that someone's lived experience can have the same weight as someone's degree, right? Oftentimes, I will tell you, I'd rather have someone with a lived experience than someone who has a PhD, went for 2 weeks, did some research in a community, and then came back and wrote a book about it. I don't want that person. I want the person that has that lived experience and figured out a way to get through higher education while they took care of their 3 kids, wasn't able to find a mentor to do research, but was able to get a PhD. It took them 7 years, and now they're applying for a job, and we can say there was an opportunity gap. And that's what I challenge people on. I want people to think about the opportunity gap. And if we know representation matters in terms of how students interact with our institution, and we have a mission of making students global citizens, to get representation here, we're going to have to rethink and interrogate the opportunity gap that has not only existed for our students, but for our faculty and employees. How do we tool and skill people up? How do we make our places of employment, regardless of your higher education or not, accessible to people? An example of this is, as a licensed counselor in the state of Wisconsin, you have to go get a master's degree. You have to do a practicum while you're in school. Then you have to take a test and do 3,000 hours. Oftentimes, you have to pay someone to supervise you to get your 3,000 hours to become licensed as a counselor. And one thing I've heard over and over in Oshkosh community, not just our institution, is we don't have diverse counselors. We don't have Black counselors in our pipeline. And that's not true. We need to build a pipeline. So that's where I put my energy. And I've worked with our HR to actually put money aside to just respond to the opportunity gap. If we have candidates who we know are in our pipeline, who we could recruit, we've put money behind holding salary lines for faculty, addressing inequities in pay. I have accountability measures where I use to provide professional development dollars for faculty and staff to have those same opportunities they weren't afforded in their educational experience. And so I will tell you, as you can tell, I can sometimes be a lot. People have stopped saying that to me. They don't, because I have a response and I have an actionable thing and strategy we can deploy right away to address the very thing that they're saying. And so my pushback is then I would go back to your why. So if you're pushing back on even looking at the structure of how you hire people, why do you even want to do EDI, DEI? Why is it important to you? If you're not even setting the preconditions for there to be equal opportunity, and if you're not even understanding who's your most vulnerable population in terms of either racialized identity, gender, sexuality, etc., then you're not even positioning yourself to respond in real time to what representation needs to look like, and building for your pipeline. So if you know, in our community in Oshkosh, we have seen an increase in Hispanic and Hmong families. So how are we building a pipeline for students to UW Oshkosh, but also for employment? On our position descriptions for my division, I make everybody put bilingual Spanish and Hmong as a requirement. Let's start putting things that are going to give opportunity to individuals who are in our pipeline and address the very thing I'm wanting to address in terms of getting representation here to serve the students. So that's one thing. And I've also worked with our system to include some language about what lived experience could mean in terms of someone's professional experience. And so we've added a caveat around professional experience and included some lived experience verbiage and components of professional development that people can put on their CV when they apply for positions.
Yeah, again, I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I always have this debate with my friends, and actually Rob on my team, we have this debate sometimes too. And I want to say, like, if I'm going to hire a lawyer, I want to actually have a lawyer who's actually been in the courtroom, not someone just taught to law class, right? So the degree means something, but at the end of the day, it's about, have you had the experience to do the job, right? So I love what you're saying. I want to also let people know they've asked a lot of good questions. We have about 12 minutes here, and so it shows that we should be doing these panels more often, that this is needed. And I will try to get to what we can, but if we can't get to you, email us, and we'll try to get to answers if we can from the team for this panel at some other time. But Jessica, do you want to answer the same question?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add to what's already been said. I think lived experience is critical. However, it's not necessarily something that's valued, at least from my professional experience in the professional world. I think what is valued, and this may offend some people, but I think what is valued is oftentimes we give a lot of leverage to like mediocrity, to be honest. You know, the idea that someone who is doing an okay job and sticks around long enough is the person who is looked to for promotion opportunities, leadership opportunities, while someone who, you know, may not have as much professional experience, but has done an amazing job in the short time that they've been there, or brings, you know, endless amount of lived experiences that, as we've discussed, is really important. You know, how those, in this case, those two candidates are looked at. Again, I feel like just the way that the structure is built and the hiring structure is built, there's more weight given to, you know, these values that don't, in my opinion, really give a great idea of a person's potential or what a person can bring to the table. It's more so, this person has done all right, they've been here long enough, why don't we go ahead and just, you know, offer them the position. So that's something that I've really struggled with. And then also, you know, the next thing, aside from the lived experiences, you know, representation is important. We shouldn't stop there. Like Dr. Grady said, we shouldn't wait for representation to act. And we also need to understand that representation does not equal inclusivity and belonging, right? Adding more people of color to a predominantly white institution, predominantly white businesses, without changing the environment, without changing the structure, without making it, you know, livable, really only creates further oppression for the people of color that, you know, in this case, the organization has hired. So we really, again, kind of tying it back to the original question, what are some of the questions that organizations should ask as they embark on the DEI, you know, journey, is what is your commitment level? What are you willing to change about the policies, practices, and procedures? And how are you willing to support, you know, the folks doing this work? We have to think beyond representation and really interrogate how we are going to change the environment and systems to make this a, you know, a good experience for the people that we're bringing in.
I'm laughing and taking notes at the same time. I'm laughing because you're saying stuff that should be common sense, but I know it's not. And so it's just powerful stuff to hear this. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I hope
I'm just keeping it real.
And I love that. And you know what? People who are watching need that, because they can rarely go somewhere where they can get information that's real, that they can actually act on. And these are all practical things that you all are saying. Raya, do you want to answer the same question, Raya, about this?
What I'd like to add to this, I think everything has been so well said, but hiring for passion and potential is imperative, right? So we have so many opportunities to do on-the-job training and to really assess the life work and the life experience piece of things. And so when we examine this, and this is part of what the city of Green Bay is doing as well, really looking at passion and potential and honing in on where people can learn. And I know this has been said in so many different spaces over and over, but skills can be taught. Is the passion there? Mm-hmm. Are the soft skills there? Are people communicators? Are people ready to learn what that means? Are people prepared to kind of walk into a space with a continuous learning perspective, right? And so that has to come from all sides of the board. That has to come from the hiring committees down to the people walking into the roles. People have to be interested in education. People have to be interested in this continuous learning approach, this growth culture. It needs to be part of the mentality as we walk through these different instances, and pulling apart some of those processes, right? Really digging in. I know so many different organizations have not revamped or are just starting to examine, why. Ask yourself, why are we doing it like this? Does this really make sense? Does this fit 2022? How does this, are we being agile? I think is the question. Are we being agile to the needs of our organization and the needs of our community? And so agility has a lot to do with it when it comes to processes and policy, I think.
Yeah, I love that agility. I love that. Nick, do you want to? We have 5 minutes here. Do you want to answer this question, Nick? If not, I'm gonna get to on the.
Oh, I can just speak to in my profession. I think the lived experience is what gets me further with kids. And I mean, I may have more time on my hands outside of a classroom teacher, but the lived experience, because I can have those conversations with those youngsters. But it gives me the upper hand on getting questions answered, or kids feeling comfortable enough to come to me to talk about certain things that they wouldn't talk about outside of that relationship. So that's why I think relationships are extremely important when it comes to this work. But the only way that I could get into this work is to, as a Black man, is to attain a degree after degree after degree, because I didn't have enough of this to be able to get here, has always been the thing. So I knew I had to push through with, more education in order to get in that space. But the lived experience, I think, and I know just from my experience, from me being in these positions, gets me a lot further than what my degrees will with our students.
Okay, so I'm gonna go through this quick. So I'm just gonna give one question to each of you, then try to move on. Okay, so I'm not picking any favorites. So I don't want Dr. Grady getting mad at me already. So I just want to make sure.
I'm fine going last. I like being in the opposition. So
I'm just picking on you. Okay. What can businesses do to support their people of color? Who was talking about earlier about protecting? Was that you? That was you, Demir, right?
Protect. Yeah, I was. Again, I think the strategy needs to match the situation. I don't think there's one silver bullet for every organization and to attempt to duplicate what's happening and call it best practices. I would say what I've seen work in Milwaukee, and I sit on a couple boards still in Milwaukee, and what will work here is drastically different. And so one thing I try to do is remember that nobody wants to feel like they're the affirmative action hire or singled out because of their race. So be very mindful, intentional about that. And I also tell people that affinity groups that don't happen organically is work. So if you would like to provide opportunity for people to gather, break bread, and share resources, give money and give time, give course release if you work in higher education, for people to gather and have community and find support. Find mentors for people, meet with them, even if they're not in your direct line, and ask them, where do they see themselves 5-10 years, help them professional develop. Figure out what questions they don't know to ask and tell them the information. Also, I encourage people to continue to do climate surveys, but be intentional. Do intentional sampling with your minoritized or structurally excluded folks.
So we have 2 minutes here. So I'm going to go around and let each of you just say your parting words, and so we can wrap this up. This has been a fabulous panel. We need to do this again because it was so insightful, and I was having fun. It's like a family conversation. So Ryan, do you want to have a parting words for the group, for the audience?
Well, I just want to say how much I appreciate the opportunity to join everybody today. And I appreciate the audience being here and really spending some time kind of digging through some of these huge concepts with us. This is extremely important work that we're doing. And as organizations continue to kind of muddle through some of this and learn the ropes of this, my I guess my advice would be please lean into resources, continue to ask questions, have those crucial conversations. I don't want to call them difficult, but they certainly are crucial. So continue to have those crucial conversations. Do not be afraid to roll up your sleeves and get the work done, and to bring in key stakeholders and players in order to do this right instead of doing it fast. I can't say enough for that. So, Henry, thank you for having me here, and I appreciate this opportunity to join everybody on the panel today.
Yeah, News Lab and USA Today Network, we all appreciate you being here. We really do. Nick, do you want any final words, my friend?
Thank you guys for having me on this panel. It was wonderful for me. I really appreciate it. But I'll just say, in this work, be open, honest, vulnerable, and ready to listen without defending.
I like that. Jessica?
Yeah, again, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. The Northeast Wisconsin region is changing, and it's changing drastically, and it's not going to stop. We have folks, the Latino community is changing. We have refugee asylum seekers, folks moving, from neighboring states up. And so we have no choice but to be responsive, respond to the changing needs of the community. For educational institutions and businesses, my charge to you all is to embrace your disruptors, as Dr. Grady previously called them. We're gifts. We're gifts to the organization, to the community. Don't embrace people of color just when they fit, that respectable box that oftentimes folks try to put us in. Embrace all of who we are, because that is the only way that we will make, actionable, sustainable, and impactful change. So that is my charge for members of the Northeast Wisconsin community. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Tamara, you?
Yeah, real quick, I want to thank the panelists and you for this family conversation. And I just want to remind people that I think of this work as kind of a mile race. I used to be a runner, and I could run a mile. I won't brag, but kind of like under 6 minutes. I was really good. But now I probably run a mile around 13 plus minutes and have to walk some of it. And it really comes down to my stamina sometimes. And I think when flashpoints happen in our communities, in our country, we position ourselves to respond, or we respond by giving money and resources towards these initiatives to start. But again, I want to remind people, it does not have to take a crisis for us to position ourselves and be ready. So I want you to walk away and think about, how do you get ready for the people who are thinking about moving to our region, who are finishing their degrees at any of the schools in our region, in the Fox Valley, and are ready to come and be part of contributing members to our society. How do we make sure that they come here and can thrive here?
So I want to thank you, all of our panelists, wonderful panelists. I hope you enjoyed this. Again, we apologize for not getting to all your questions, wonderful questions. Again, you can email us and we'll try to answer them the best we can. Also, I want to thank our partners at USA Today Network, News Lab, and hopefully we can do more of these Home is Here series more. And if you want more of this content for Masters 5, Fox Valley 365, we also have our Men's Leadership Summit coming up in April. It's a virtual, all people of color, talking about these type of issues. So if you get a chance, come check us out. But again, we thank all of you for joining us. Again, thank you all the panelists. You were absolutely fabulous. And we hope you all have a good week and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is 365 Media.